Hello viewers, welcome back to the Moose Mobile Auto Repair channel, and today we're working on a 2012 Toyota Corolla with the 1.8 liter engine. Today the customer's complaint is that they heard a noise coming from the engine drive belt area, and unfortunately I was not exactly able to duplicate that noise. I did go for a road test off camera with the customer, and we were not able to hear the noise. I thought maybe it was probably a bearing noise, like from the accessory drive area, like an alternator or the water pump or something, or a possible wheel bearing issue. So the customer came to me in time because I did my due diligence. I checked the battery, and I also checked the charging voltage. And this vehicle is not putting out any charging voltage. So we are going to have a look at the charging system on this, because we potentially have an issue, most likely with the alternator. But I want to confirm that the charging circuit is all good, the wiring is all good, before we condemn the alternator. So I'm going to start the engine and to let it run. So now I can hear a whining noise going on in the engine area, because before it was not doing that. I definitely can hear and feel it coming from the alternator accessory drive area, very loud. So we are going to grab a multimeter to check the charging voltage, DC volts. So I'm going to hook up the positive and the negative lead, and we are getting 12.74 volts and slowly dropping. Earlier it was about 11.43 or something volts, because the vehicle was just driven. This vehicle has been sitting overnight, so usually when you let the batteries rest, they have some more voltage after they sit for a brief time. So the voltage is slowly dropping now, 12.63 volts, and so it should be around 14 volts, but it's not. And depending on the temperature is going to fluctuate on the Toyotas, usually anywhere from 13.3, 13.2 to roughly 14.2 or so, and is going to be dependent on the weather. Usually the hotter the weather, the slightly lower the voltage. The colder the weather, the higher the voltage usually. So you can see the voltage is dropping now, slowly. So this vehicle is running directly off of the battery. So at this moment, I'm going to check the charging circuit, have a look at the alternator directly, and see if the wiring is okay before we condemn the alternator. So I'm going to remove the engine cover and get that out of the way. So I removed the cover. We have good access to the alternator. The first thing you want to do is to remove the protective cap to check the positive cable going to the alternator and to the battery, to make sure that's putting out voltage. So you can carefully remove the protective cap, get it out of the way. you don't want to touch the metal on metal, otherwise you will short something out. But somehow you want to get it off, just like that. So now I want to put the positive lead onto the alternator, and the negative lead stays on the negative post of the battery over here, as you can see. So that's gonna stay there, and you guys can observe the reading. I'm gonna put this somewhere so you guys can see it properly. So I'm gonna put this on the positive and the negative. You should get a reading, so you know that the cable is good. Usually the cable is good in most cases. So I'm getting a reading, so 11.96 volts and dropping. So that's good. So we know that we are good so far. The last thing we need to check is the something called the exciter wire that excites the voltage from the regulator, from the alternator. So we need to check that. Now, if you don't have a wiring diagram, you can check for voltage or for a reading. As soon as you get a reading or a number, then that's the correct wire. So I'm using one of my back probe kits, part number 23500 from Tool Aid. You can get this from Amazon. So I'm just going to hook up something here to see on if I can get to the wiring. So I believe on this one it's probably the yellow wire, I think, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm just gonna see until I get a reading of some sort. Yeah, it is the yellow wire. So it's the yellow wire. I have back probe the connector. I believe it's a 4-pin connector. So I'm connected from behind. I back probe the connector so I can get a reading. So you can see I'm getting 11.56 volts and dropping. I'm connected directly now to the exciter wire on the alternator. So this means that the charging circuit is good, the wiring and everything is good, and the computer is good, everything is good. The only thing that's not good is the alternator. So this vehicle, it needs an alternator. So I'm connected to the negative lead on the negative post of the battery, and the positive lead is going to here, and I'm connected directly to the connector as the engine is running. So I know that the wiring is good now because I'm receiving voltage. So this tells us that the alternator is not charging. So I have confirmed my diagnosis that the charging system is okay, the wiring and everything is okay. This vehicle, it needs an alternator. So I already have the okay to replace the alternator, so I'm gonna go ahead and replace it now on this vehicle. I'm gonna be showing you the removal and replacement, and at the same time I'm going to be replacing the drive belt while I'm in there, because this is the original 12-year-old drive belt when the vehicle was new. One other thing I forgot to mention is that a lot of times on cars these days, you will not get a warning light, the battery warning light on the dash. It will come on when it's too late, and so you won't know that that if the alternator is working or not, unless that the lights are dim or something, and you're driving at nighttime. Right now, the vehicle is running, the engine is on, but there's no warning lights. The parking brake is just on. I can release the parking brake. And there's no warning lights for the charging system. And a lot of times, believe it or not, the vehicle is not going to warn you that there's an issue with the charging system. Now, it depends, because I know that sometimes it may take several key cycles or so for the computer to turn on that battery light, but on these vehicles, more often than not, most times it will not warn you, so you won't know. The customer came to me just in time, and the vehicle is still running as I'm speaking. So it was a good thing that the customer came, because they were hearing a noise from under the engine compartment, and it did not sound normal. So I'm going to shut the vehicle off. So before we start, we need to disconnect the negative terminal of the battery, because we don't want to short anything out. So anytime when you're doing electrical work, you want to disconnect the negative terminal of the battery. And for safety, we will just use a rag to to cover it up. And if you have any spare uh, battery caps, you can also place a plastic cap over the terminal, so that way you don't accidentally damage anything. One thing I forgot to mention is that this battery is approximately 6 years old. It says August 2018. I tested this battery off camera and it's still okay. Although it's 6 years old, we are still going to keep this battery for now because it's still working. So the battery conductance tester, it tested this battery okay. So we are going to leave it for now. But I did notify the customer that the battery is getting old and it may need a replacement soon. So before we start, make sure you draw yourself a routing diagram of the drive belt. You want to know on how the belt is routed through. So you want to make sure that you draw a routing diagram or get a diagram online somewhere before you take the belt off. So what we are going to do, we are going to loosen the 14 uh, millimeter mounting bolt first, and then we are going to loosen up the pivot bolts and the other 12 millimeter mounting bolts on top. To loosen these bolts, you want to use a long ratchet and a 14 millimeter deep socket to loosen up the mounting bolt. Now it will be on extremely tight if the alternator has never been removed before in the past. So you will need a breaker bar maybe, or a very long ratchet to loosen it up. So what's next? You want to loosen up the 12 millimeter uh, pivot bolt over here. And I believe we are going to be removing the other 12 millimeter bolt that's holding this bracket in place. So we're going to loosen up the pivot bolt. Just loosen it up for now, and then later we are going to take it out. We just need to loosen up the belt so we can get the belt off. And then now you can loosen up the adjustment bolt. So that you're just able to get the belt off. So now I should be able to take the belt off without any problems. Cause it's I loosened everything up. This is the old belt original old belt. So now we are going to remove the electrical connections. We're going to remove the 10 millimeter nut. Move the cable out of the way. And we need to disconnect the connector for the alternator. There's the tab over here that you need to push down with your thumb, and you should be able to pull it out. Now you can use either a flathead screwdriver or a trim tool to push on the tab. Push the tab out so that you're able to slide it off from the bracket. The alternator is loose, so you may need to hold down on the alternator to get this off. You can take this off first before you take anything else off. And that also works. It doesn't really matter. So take this out, and now it's free. And now we have to remove the 10 millimeter bolt for this bracket. We may need to transfer over the bracket. So remove the 10 millimeter nut. Make sure you note the orientation on which way the bracket is pointing towards before you take this off. So now I'm just using my electric cordless ratchet to remove the 14 millimeter bolt. I don't want to go all the way with the ratchet because then it's going to hit the frame on the side. Just want to loosen it up just until you may be halfway or 3/4 out. You can switch to a smaller socket if you want. So I'm just going to take the 14 millimeter mounting bolt out. And here it is. And later we are going to lubricate it with some anti-seize. So now we're going to continue to remove the bolt, the pivot bolt. We'll take that out. This is going to come out all together. And we need to remove, I believe we need to remove, you can remove the bracket if you want this bolt here to take the entire bracket out. You probably don't have to take it out, but it's probably best if you do. So we're going to remove that as well. You can remove the 12 millimeter bolt that's over here. To loosen it up. So now you should be able to get the alternator out, hopefully, without too much hassles. You just need to wiggle it back and forth. And if that doesn't work, sometimes it can be really stuck in there. You can use like a pry bar to carefully to pry underneath the alternator to get it out. So we're just going to keep on wiggling the alternator until it comes out. Now it's out. Quite a bit of wiggling, but it's out now. So as you are in here, you also want to check the water pump to see if there's any noise, and to also check if there's any play in the pulley. A tiny amount of play is normal, but too much play in, then there's a problem. And you want to check the AC compressor. Now, it seems like on this particular vehicle, the water pump is maybe making a tiny bit of noise, and the same for the AC compressor. I'll just notify the customer, just probably to keep an eye on it for now. It's nothing too serious or major at the moment, so we'll just probably keep an eye on it for now. Uh, I don't see anything like that needs immediate replacement, but there is a tiny bit of noise though, so I will just inform the customer for now about that. The water pump and the AC compressor is a little noisy. I think it seems to be okay for the most part, so I don't think it's anything like major or anything. So we are just going to leave it for now. So now, because this customer is in a pinch and I need to get this vehicle back to service as soon as possible, I got an aftermarket alternator. It's a Remy or Delco Remy alternator. It's remanufactured. So just compare the alternator, make sure you have the correct part and everything is right. Make sure that everything is all the same. The pulleys are the same. The number of grooves and the pulleys are the same. The mounting bolts and everything is all the same for the alternator. So make sure everything is the same. The 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 nut for the positive cable and the connector pins. Make sure everything is the same. The number of ribs, grooves, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are a total of 6. This one also 6. This one here is a little bit noisy. Make sure there's no noise or anything, and then I should be all good to go to install this alternator. Now we are going to install the new alternator. Make sure you put it in the correct direction. Now you need to line it up in between the bracket that's on the engine. So that's the most challenging part usually. And so now I just need to line up the alternator in between the bracket of the engine. And I applied some anti-seize on the bolt, so make sure you apply some form of anti-seize so that it does not get seized up in the future if anything happens. You also make it easy for the installation. So we're going to insert the bolt in, and we'll need to line it up. Sometimes you have to go by feel to know that it's in. now I got the bolt through. I ran it down. And usually when it's about halfway or 3/4 in, then you can start to tighten it up. You can see the threads down there. The threads down here, you can see it. It's in between and it's out, so you know that you're all the way through. You could see the threads uh, coming out from the other end, so you know you are through. I'm already in between the bolt is already in between the bracket over here, so that's how you know that the bolt is in. So now I'm going to reinstall the bracket assembly. It's just the reverse of removal, just the installation. It's probably a good idea to take pictures first before you remove anything if you are not familiar with this job, and that way it'll make life a little easier in case if you forget something. You're just gonna temporarily install this. I put some anti-seize on the adjuster bolt, just using some Permatex silver grade anti-seize stuff. So I know some guys, they like to go crazy on this, but you don't need to. But it's not too big of a huge deal. But whatever floats your boat. Going to line this up. I will put the torque spec on the screen somewhere for you guys to see if you want to torque it. But usually you can just tighten these guys down snug, and you should be okay. So I'm just going to tighten down the main uh, mounting bolt for the bracket, just to get it snug. I don't want this to be moving too much everywhere. So we'll try to see if I can find the torque spec if you want to torque these. Typically just average tight and you're good. So I'm just going to tighten this up a tiny bit. I didn't tighten the bottom mounting bolt. It's slightly loose still because we still need to reinstall the drive belt. So we're just going to tighten up a little bit the 12 millimeter pivot bolt. Just to keep it a little bit loose so the alternator can move. Then we're going to install the belt afterwards. So now we're going to reinstall everything back. Bracket piece. Reinstall the bracket piece. It was facing this way, facing down. Make sure you keep this straight as you are tightening up the bolt because the bracket is going to move. Tighten down the bolt and hold the bracket down so it does not move. Don't need to tighten it down too tight. These are very small bolts. And so what we're going to do next, we're going to put a little bit of the dielectric grease on the connector. I want to put too much, but a tad bit. This will help prevent corrosion and any issues with the electrical connection. It just helps to make removal easier for next time. Keeps moisture away and stuff. So we're gonna install the power cable for the alternator. This is a 10 millimeter nut that it came with. Just use the supplied nut. Make sure you line up. Make sure you line up the cable properly inside the housing of the alternator. Thread this in by hand all the way. Again, you need to be very careful to tighten this just okay tight, snug. You don't need to over tighten it. Otherwise, if you break this, and then you damage the entire alternator. Make sure everything is lined up properly. Make sure it's not loose. Yeah, that's good. This is good. Make sure when you put the connector in, it clicks into place. And after I'm finished there, I just put a tad bit of dielectric grease to prevent any corrosion or whatever. We're going to install the protective cap back in. That's good. This is good. That's tight. Need to install the harness back in. Install the harness back. So now I got the Continental belt. So I'm just going to be using this. This is the part number. This is the length of the belt, 6PK1230. It's a 6 rib belt, 1230 millimeters. We're just going to install that. Probably can't show too much because there's not much working room here. Best thing to do when installing belts is to route it down to the crank pulley first, the furthest pulley away, and bring it up and just hold the tension up just like this before you put it over the water pump, and then it will make life a little easier. So I'm just going to lift up on this belt and should go from underneath, from just under the alternator and AC compressor to the water pump. Just slide it on there, and you heard it. You heard the belt clip into place. So just make sure that the belt is seated properly in their grooves, in that it's not riding against the edges of the pulleys. Otherwise, it's going to damage the belt. So now I'm going to tighten up the adjuster to tighten the belt down. We're just going to tighten it up until we have about maybe half inch of deflection. There are tools that you can use. There's I believe they call it the Gates Cricket tool, which is basically a belt tension gauge. And a rule of thumb is usually about 30 pounds per rib. This is a 6 rib belt. So 6 times 30 is 180 pounds. So that's how tight that a belt should be. I'll see if I have it here. I haven't used it in years because I already got in the feel on how tight a belt should be. So we're just going to tighten up the adjuster now. It's a 12 millimeters. Just going to tighten it up now. Just until you feel that the belt is somewhat tight. You don't want to put it too tight, otherwise it's going to damage the bearings of the uh, accessories that are uh, on this vehicle. So you have to install it somewhat tight because this belt is a new belt, and so the vehicle will need to be ran for 5 minutes or more, because new belts, they stretch a little bit. You may need to readjust it if needed, but if you tighten it up uh, tight enough, then you should be okay for the most part. But still, you'll need to double check the tension on this, because it's manually tension, because there's no automatic tensioner on this vehicle. So I'm just trying to feel the belt. Typically, if you push down, should be about half an inch deflection. So make sure it's somewhat tight. So I think that's okay for now. I think we'll just leave it at that. Maybe I'll tighten it up a tiny bit more. You don't want it too tight, because that will uh, be catastrophic to the accessory drive system. You just want to tighten it just enough. Let me loosen that a bit. So now I'm happy with that. We're going to proceed to tighten up the pivot bolt now. It's a 12 millimeter on the side. I will put the torque spec for you guys to see if you want to torque it down. That's for that. And then we're just going to tighten down the bottom pivot bolt now, down here on the side. So we're just going to tighten down the pivot bolt. That should be good. I'm just going to use a ratchet just to verify the bottom pivot bolt is tight. These bolts don't need to be all that tight. You just need to tighten it down snug and you're good. You don't need to crank it up so hard. But I'm just verifying to make sure it's tight. That's all. So just make sure everything is tight. Be careful from the ground cable that could be in the way here of the belt. Make sure that's not in the way. Make sure everything is in. And then we're just going to finish up here. And then after, I will have to charge the battery before I start the vehicle up. So just verify that the belt is on properly and everything is okay. Everything is seated in properly before you proceed. So I was saying earlier, you probably need about half an inch deflection as a rule of thumb. So somewhere in the middle, you can push down and be able to turn the belt somewhat. So you should have a little bit of slack or deflection. So make sure that push down in the middle should maybe have about half an inch. There will be a spec for each vehicle. I'll see if I can find the spec and put it on the screen. So once you're done, it's safe to reconnect the battery terminal. You may need to reconfigure the radio stations and stuff if you use the radio. and it may take some time for the vehicle to relearn the parameters. So the vehicle may not run very well for the first little while until it relearns all of the sensors and the parameters. So we're going to reinstall the negative terminal of the battery now. Going to tighten up the terminal, and then after we're going to just recharge the battery after that. I'm going to tighten up the terminal until it's tight. So now you want to make sure that you charge the battery to fully charge 12.6 volts, because if you don't charge the battery and you start the vehicle up, it could damage the new alternator. So you want to make sure that you charge the battery to a full charge before you start the vehicle. So I have the battery charger connected. I don't have the fancy battery charger. Probably put a for a charge for 90 minutes, and I think that should be okay at 12 volts at 10 amps. So we'll just leave it at that, and then after we are going to start the vehicle after it's done charging. So now I'm done charging the battery. Everything is all good. I ended up charging the battery for roughly half an hour. It's above 12.6 volts. So this has a surface charge. Anything above 12.6 volts, it would mean that there is a surface charge, because it's more than battery voltage. This is 12.81, so we're good. This is a fully charged battery, so I'm okay to start the vehicle now. We are going to start it, verify for proper operation, and making sure that the alternator is putting out charging voltage. I'm just going to put this here for you guys to see. So I'm going to start the vehicle now. Now, typically on Toyota vehicles, you should leave the key on for about half a minute, up to 1 minute. Otherwise, the engine will start and stall, because typically on Toyota vehicles, they go through a memory reset when you disconnect the battery. So if you try to start it, it will start and stall. So have the key on the on ignition and just wait for maybe half a minute or so, and then start the engine. So I'm going to start the engine now. So now the engine is running. We are getting alternator voltage now, proper voltage now. I have the headlights on. I just have the headlights and everything on. So it's putting out 13.97 volts, which is good. This is excellent. So our vehicle is charging now. So I'm just gonna verify, making sure that everything is okay. I'm going to let the vehicle run for 5 to 10 minutes to get the belt to wear in onto the pulleys. I'm going to double check the belt tension, and then I think that's going to be it. I'm going to go for a road test after this, and then and that's it. So that's it for this one. I double checked the charging voltage, and I double checked the belt tension, verify that it's tight, and you have at least maybe half an inch deflection. But there is a spec for each vehicle, so I will post the spec on the screen if I'm able to find it, and just make sure everything is tight. and then go for a road test and just verify again that the alternator is charging properly so there's no issues and you won't have any comebacks. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please don't forget to give it a like, and please consider subscribing to my channel if you're not already a subscriber, and please don't forget to hit that bell notification if you haven't done so, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good night and take care.